So as Dylan said, the topic for today is AI and society, and we could really have an entire conference just on that one topic. In fact, I think I've been to a conference just on that topic. So we've got a lot to cover in 45 minutes. So we're going to try to break it down into a few main topics or buckets. One on kind of the ethics and trust-related issues with regard to AI. One on bias. And then we'll move more into some of the regulatory as well as industry-specific issues related to AI. And if we have time, certainly the idea of the future of work. As Dylan said, I've got 4 great panelists to talk with me today, which is great because I was an art history major in college, so I'm probably better at talking about Impressionist art than I am at, algorithms and explainability. So with that, we will begin. Just again, you do have an app. Feel free to send in your questions. I will weave them in if they are good. I may even weave them in if they're not so good. But I think what we're going to start off doing is maybe just each of you 30 seconds to a minute about kind of why you're on this panel and more specifically kind of your different areas of expertise as it relates to AI. So we can start with Alana and just kind of go down the line.
Great. Thank you all for having me here today. Alana Golbin, I'm a director of an artificial intelligence lab at PwC US. We're part of a broader emerging technologies team, and we're essentially an applied research lab. So we test out emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, and we see how we can apply them to address some emerging client problems. And over the last few years, we've been seeing a transition of massive adoption of artificial intelligence with our clients, but also an emerging awareness of some risks associated. And so over the past few years, I've been primarily focusing on some of those challenges and how we can mitigate those challenges so that we can capture the value from artificial intelligence.
Great, thank you. Swapna.
Swapna Malekar, product manager with RBC, Royal Bank of Canada. We build fintech products and solutions and services for our clients. The technologies which we use behind the lens should not be, so customers should not be made aware of what we use behind the scenes, right? So we want to create intuitive, seamless experiences for our customers, whether it's the in-branch experience or whether it's the digital experience. AI is a component of it. So I work in a team that uses AI and that uses other kinds of technology to produce these amazing experiences for our clients. So I'm going to come at this. I'm going to be talking about how banks are dealing with AI and how they are interacting with their customers using AI.
Great. Kitty.
Kitty Parry, founder of DeepView and CEO. DeepView enables primarily banks, regulated organizations to use social media safely. We've studied the global landscape of regulation in a great deal of detail. So we have the first solution that meets GDPR and also manages data leakage with a specific focus on photos and videos. We've all heard of data leakage, and we know the solutions that pick up text. But the area of photos and videos is now becoming a great source of intelligence for hackers and external bad hats, so to speak. So this is really our focus on AI and machine learning. We've built which is pending patent, excitingly, algorithm able to read photos and videos, particularly for this data leakage. So hence my interest in the AI bias topic.
Great, thank you.
And I'm Lindsay Shepard. I'm at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which is a defense and national security think tank here in Washington. Primarily, I work on defense and technology issues, so thinking about how does the defense and national security enterprise leverage and adopt emerging technologies. I actually came to CSIS from the Defense Research and Development Enterprise, so with a background in engineering.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So I guess I'll start with an adage that I'm probably going to share, which is trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. This is obviously incredibly important when it comes to AI. And how do we go about really explaining what AI does, and how do you really get past the trust deficit? And really, this is whoever would like to kick off.
I can start.
Okay.
I think when we're trying to decide what it means to build trust with different stakeholders, we need to be understanding that people have different positions and different types of interactions with artificial intelligence. There are end users, which I think is primarily what comes to mind, but then there's also the developers, those who are creating the applications themselves, people within the organization who may oversee the deployment and use of artificial intelligence, and it impacts their core business. And then there's also regulators and auditors. So there is a large variety of people that need to trust how models are operating, how models are coming to their conclusions. Some of that is going to be through design, how we choose the models that are actually used in certain systems. Some models are more easy to understand than others just by nature. Then it's also about how we translate those findings so that people trust. But fundamentally, it comes down to, is this model doing what you're expecting it to, and how do you tell that to different stakeholders?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess just one quick follow-up before we continue. How does that interact with kind of some of the proprietary issues that goes along with, being in a bank or any real institution? It gets to a point where you can only be so transparent. There still has to be behind the curtain. So how do you kind of work that in with the idea of still being able to explain and have trust, but you can't show it all?
From a banking perspective, customers trust a bank, right? Or we want them to trust banks because we have their financial data. And that data, whether it's the client data, whether it's the demographic data, whether it's a core financial data, is the central component of any financial service or any bank. Banks basically do three things. They move money, they lend money, they store money. From a regulatory point of view or from proprietary lens, I would say if we can provide a model or a framework where we protect users or clients' data, but at the same time be transparent enough to be able to explain how are we providing those recommendations and those insights and those services to them using some magical technology in the background, I think half of our job is done. So creating that balance between how transparent we want to be with our customers, with our clients, as well as protecting their privacy, protecting their data. I think that is the core thing that we as bankers look at AI and look at data.
Yeah.
And I think just adding on that point, the difficulty really is you've got the balance of people's time, customers' time. They don't have time to understand the algorithm that's sitting behind all the decisions that are making on the platform. Yet when they ask or when it may become a public conversation, the process by which the algorithm is either trained or built enables the trust to occur.
Right.
Ultimately, we all know the reason why an algorithm may see a man in a white coat as a doctor versus a woman in a white coat as a beautician is primarily because the people training that algorithm, in essence, innately, whether it's conscious or not, are biased in themselves. And I think really that's what we now have a responsibility as organizations to assess and make sure that we're really paying attention to the innate bias that may be coming through in these algorithms. Otherwise, we're going to have a multiplication of human bias with computer bias, which could lead to some very interesting decisions and likely not particularly helpful.
Sure.
Definitely. And when we talk about IP protection, which is, I think, one of the core questions here, IP fundamentally is the code. It's also the data that goes into it. We don't necessarily need to share the code or the underlying data in order to build trust and transparency. We just need to make sure that we can expose the variety of outcomes that the model is good at predicting, and where it is deficient, that's how we build the trust. So you can still protect IP quite well.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think Ilana brought up a good point that part of this goes back to the variety of users that are interacting with your system and technology, understanding and having a good sense for what is expected performance. And so part of the challenge that we have is that understanding of expected performance has to change as we introduce machine learning solutions into our systems, because that learning solution inherently means that performance will improve over time. and that I should not be getting the same results every time. If that happens, then I have overfit my model to my data, and I've done exactly what I don't want. So part of this in the defense enterprise means that as we introduce machine learning-based solutions into our systems, it fundamentally makes us rethink how we do test and evaluation and verification and validation of systems. The defense acquisition enterprise, or any type of really like system producing enterprise, is founded on the concept that I can iron out all of the kinks within a certain bounded performance before it gets released to the public. But now, as I think about how do I bring in machine learning, I actually want performance to change and evolve. And so that means some of those structures and policies for actually doing test and evaluation to certify a system have to evolve with AI and machine learning.
Right, right. And I mean, we were talking about kind of bias for a bit. There's been bias in technology since time immemorial. Sei-Fei Li was talking about this with a pair of scissors. For ages, scissors were only for right-handed people. And there was a bias towards right-handed people, and there was no technology, if you want to call scissors technology, to deal with left-handed people. But then eventually, there was an understanding that there was a certain bias, and we were able to address it. Do you feel like the issue of bias is kind of more profound, or I guess, are people thinking about bias in kind of the C-suite level? I mean, you all are obviously focused on this. You understand some of the issues, but is it the same up the chain, or do you think there's still a bit of divide that's not making its way to the top?
From what I'm seeing with the banks, I think, I know we're going to touch on later the regulatory landscape,
right.
But the onerous, complex issues that a board are having to face means that bias isn't really going to fit onto their agenda, because
right.
there are so many fires and burning issues, and we're seeing the political landscape change, obviously, with Brexit in the UK, or not, who knows. The bias is probably not coming into, I think, a daily conversation or even a quarterly conversation. I think the responsibility really is on the IT team, the tech team building it, to be ensuring that they're communicating how it's addressed. And yes, if the C-suite can ask how it's being addressed, and we can enable that with conversations and dialogue like this, excellent. And even a kind of acknowledgement that algorithms are being understood to their bias.
I do think it's becoming a more emerging part of the discussion, though, especially as we start to see organizations receive pushback or blowback in the public media space, especially as people are declaring that certain algorithms are biased toward certain minority groups. So it is causing us to rethink at an executive level what the responsibility is of an organization to address some of those concerns around bias. But at the same time, it's difficult to even identify what is subject to those concerns, because I would argue that a lot of executives don't know where artificial intelligence is being deployed across their business. So that is a fundamental challenge from a governance standpoint, just knowing where AI is being used and where we need to inspect our models.
Mm-hmm. That kind of brings up an interesting point. Are you seeing that some people are wanting to, we need to use AI because we need to use AI, and that they don't really know what AI is, but they know that the company needs it or the government needs it, or they're sure there's some problem that AI can fix if they just get AI. Are you kind of in coming up against that with some of your clients or in some of your work, or is there still more of a nuance? Okay, I see lots of nodding of heads. Yeah, please.
Yes, I mean, I think that is it's a common challenge. I think it is an evolution of the conversation, that folks are at least recognizing that this is a thing that we have to do. But that is inherently the wrong way to approach it, to say, I have AI, where can I put AI? That ultimately sets up organizations for success. The way organizations need to think about it is taking that problem-centric approach of, I have a problem, I have a workflow, I have a task. Is AI an appropriate solution? If so, let's pursue it. And it turns out that AI may not actually be the correct one. areas where there may be the risk to introduce a lot of social bias or risks, areas that are very high risk, may not be ripe for the application of AI. And so it is, I appreciate that you called that out, because it is a very subtle distinction about how you think about where AI goes. But instead of saying, I have AI, where do I put it? It's, I have a problem, does AI solve this problem? And it gets back to this kind of fundamental, there's a huge language barrier. I think when you engage with data scientists, they will use bias in a very data-centric, scientific way. As you move up the chain, bias becomes now more of a social term, things in relation to each other. And so this is one of those areas where even having that basic language and literacy around artificial intelligence is so incredibly important, because we could have conversations where I'm using bias in one way and Alana's using bias in a data science way, and she's saying, well, we can get bias out of the data, and I'm like, no, we can't possibly, it can never happen. And we're having just two totally different conversations around the same word.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that you could remove bias from data. I think that's a different a different topic. But I really appreciate you bringing the point about terminology, because within banks right now, there are very, very well-defined, mature model risk management organizations that historically have evaluated the use of models and algorithms within the business. Now we're transitioning to an era where machine learning is taken hold in different areas across the business, and we have to confront the question of what is a model. What constitutes a model? So what's subject to internal audit? What's subject to governance? And there isn't a clear answer across organizations what that actually means.
On that point, I think you're just discussing about where is AI applied to and how is it helpful? And I think often we will be having a conversation, and the conversation is, can AI help this? And actually it's, can a human do the process first, right? It's taking, actually AI is so simple, it is artificial intelligence, right? We need to know that the human flow, to Lindsay's point, is 1, 2, 3. And if that works, then you can enable the artificial intelligence to do 1, 2, 3, because you teach it to do so. And actually often just stripping it, that is often a conversation that we aren't taught to realize. We weren't taught at university to understand AI and all of these exciting technology advances. And so actually I think it's really just thinking, right, to the point, can a human do it simply? Can we do it in the right, most effective way? Therefore, can AI be taught properly to do it usefully?
And how does that come with product design, and how do you work with your clients?
Yeah, I completely echo all your sentiments. We have, usually a lot of companies have a mandate of getting into AI or having AI as a part and parcel of our daily product offerings. We have started doing that as a bank, but at the same time, as product managers, I think it's our responsibility to remind our stakeholders, our business executives, of the broader business problem that we are trying to solve first. And AI would be one of the technologies. And that's why I intend not to put a lot of emphasis on AI or any new blockchain technology or any new kind of innovative technology which is out there, because it is a means to an end. If we don't have the end defined, the business objective or the business use, the problem that we are trying to solve for the end user or the end client, if we can't define that properly, AI is not going to be of any use. So we have these conversations with our stakeholders, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, but it's our constant, we try to remind our stakeholders to just think about what are we trying to solve for, what is a job to be done for our end user, and then maybe we can apply a statistical technique to solve it, or maybe we can apply AI, or maybe we can apply something else to it, right?
Great. And I guess a moment ago, Kitty, you were mentioning the idea of you need to be able to kind of teach. If a person can do X, Y, and Z, then you can kind of teach X, Y, and Z. And actually, a question just came in about this, which is, what separates activities that are best addressed with AI, and what are some of the considerations for continued primary human involvement, and for any of you or none of you?
I mean, the best places that, and I'm most familiar with the defense and intelligence community applications. The best places that we're seeing use are places where there are just huge volumes of data that we could not possibly have a human look through, and things that are highly repetitive and redundant tasking. And so it kind of gets at they're not the sexy applications. It's the how can I automate this data process, or how can I automate this search function that enables someone to a process that would have taken 4 hours and now it takes 5 minutes. And that time savings is now something that human can then go do a more contextually complex or cognitively taxing task. So those are the places we're thinking. If I have highly repetitive tasking that is well bounded and well scoped and huge volumes of data, those are areas that are ripe for AI. The areas that are not ripe for AI are the places that have problems that are so complex and so difficult that humans struggle with doing it, making critical decisions, or arriving at conclusions and making complex judgments across multiple streams of data. That's a thing that is innately human and must remain innately human. But if I can take the person that's doing the repetitive things and have do the innately human things, that's a great way to introduce AI into your workflow.
Beautifully summarized. I think our particular application is to do with compliance. So we've had to have the human, obviously, attorney analysis of the global regulatory landscape and almost begin to bucket as you see data record keeping standards, as you see client communications, as you see what terms and words and items in photos and videos could be indicating a data leak for either security reasons or for compliance reasons. Once it's broken, exactly to Lindsay's point, once it's broken into those simple steps, then we can apply it. So one of the really interesting things, we're now seeing a lot of court cases using WhatsApp conversations. We are only employee enabled, very clearly only employee enabled. We don't go in any other way. But where employees enable us or want us to record certain conversations so that they can speak to their clients on WhatsApp or other encrypted channels, we can use AI to then filter that dialogue to help inform how certain conversations are working and so on, and latterly, obviously, for future conversations around court cases. Now, the exciting thing about that is you completely change the legal landscape, because no longer are they spending hours and hours and hours trawling through records. It's exactly to Lindsay's point, it's a very simple move forwards. And then the second thing is with the photos, videos, for a human to go through all the photos and videos that we're finding to the organizations we work for would be absolutely an onerous task. There's a very impressive lady called Rachel Toback who talks about how she will access an organization. Most global banks, she can find 60% of the information she requires to hack the organization or social engineer entry on Instagram. And that's purely by looking at photos that employees have taken within the organization. Yep. Many go, no. People don't take photos in the organization. Our generation, sadly, we do. For good and bad, it's somebody's birthday. We're excited about something, whatever. Anyway, that being able to alert the bank or organization to that data before the social engineer is then using that same data is super. And that's where it's imperative that we have the speed of AI, because that's the only way we're going to be able to beat the social engineers to picking up the phone and pretending to be the IT team and then getting into the organization.
Sure. Yeah.
Definitely. I think the unstructured data applications, that's really where machine learning and AI excel, because it's able to extract themes and trends out of large volumes of data that we as people would just take us a very, very long time. And I also echo the cool AI for boring problems angle. I think
I like that. That's a good one.
I've heard that term before. I didn't coin it. But that I think is a really undervalued application across the business. All these types of back office functions that can, automation of these types of rote, manually intensive tasks that we could be spending that time doing other things. But on the strategic decision making, I actually do think that quite a large application for artificial intelligence there. Maybe not to make the step of actually completing that decision, but surfacing information that supports us in that complex decision making. So when we're looking across large streams of data, rather than having to dive deep into each of those streams, to Lindsay's point, it could surface up various pieces of information that would make our lives easier in terms of making that final decision. So there are both, I think, automation and strategic applications.
Yeah, so from a banking perspective, since we deal with a lot of data day in and day out, one of the key use cases that we see a lot in our world is personalization, because right now we offer generic products and services to our clients. How can we, since we have so much of information about them, how can we provide them a more contextualized and personalized insight? How provide you with an insight or a recommendation which is very pertinent to your life at that point in time, rather than just selling you products and just selling you investments. So that is one of the biggest use cases that we are seeing all across the business lines in our world. And I think fraud detection, because I don't know if you guys mentioned it, but in the fintech industry, we see a lot of fraud, and I think hackers are one step ahead of us at all times, right? So if we can get to a point where we can actually use the information that we have about us, about our clients, about our customers, in order to protect them, by preventing fraud and by detecting fraud in the first place, I think it would be a success, measure of success for us. Yeah.
Okay. And while we're talking, I guess, about what are good applications versus, what still needs kind of that human component, we were in a workshop earlier today, and if he's in the room, I'm sorry, but I'm going to steal it from him, Richard Baldwin. But he was saying that sometimes we're asking the wrong questions when it comes to kind of AI and jobs and what AI can do and what AI can't do, but that actually is the question we should be asking, not how is AI going to affect the workforce, and how are we, what are the new jobs that are going to be created from AI, but we should be thinking about what are those things that AI isn't able to do, and then that will actually in turn be able to help us in terms of our upscaling and upskilling of employees. And he gave this great example that if you're able to kind of work from home, you don't need to be in the office. You maybe need to be concerned about the future of your job, in so much as, there are certain kind of human interactions and management styles that need to actually take place kind of face to face. Are there things that you guys have been thinking about that where AI isn't something that works in your particular institutions, or when you talk to clients or people and they say, what should we be thinking about of our employees of the future, and you are able to kind of talk them through that?
I guess I can start. So there are two things which come to my mind. First one is when I joined the bank, I was of the opinion that we can digitally transform our experiences. Today, clients or even I walk into a branch in order to open a bank account or in order to perform a transaction, or even talk about my long-term goals. And I was under the impression that we can actually make it a self-serve model for all our client base. But then over a period of time, I realized that no, we still put that trust in a face-to-face interaction. We still want to meet our, the representative from the bank. We still want to meet our advisors if I want to talk about my mortgage, or if I want to talk about the next big investment that I want to do and I want to save up for that. So the normal day-to-day transactions and tasks, I can do it through the platform, for example. But I still want to go to a branch maybe at least once a year, or maybe once in 3-4 months, to have that face-to-face conversation, and that is not going to go anywhere. And that's why when banks talk about using technology to completely transform the real-life experiences, they usually have a hybrid model. They want to provide you a self-serve capability, but at the same time, they want you to provide they want to provide you an option of still walking into a branch and having that interaction with a human being. So that is not going to go anywhere. And secondly, the domain experience which people, domain experts bring to the table. So AI can solve a lot of the automation tasks, and we can train AI to do a lot of things, but the domain expertise from a banking lens or from a healthcare lens or from a manufacturing or a automotive lens would still come from humans. So over a period of time, I believe AI would complement the workforce, the daily tasks, the things that can be automated can be done by AI, or AI can also be utilized to perform very specialized applications, but it would take many years to get to a generic or a general AI as we speak. We still need humans to provide that domain expertise, to provide that lens, that decision-making lens, before we can put anything out there.
And from a defense and kind of the intel community aspect, I would still assume that there's a lot that will need to continue to be done by humans, but there are, like you said, some of those kind of repetitive types of tasks that are able to be, I guess, where AI is a good solution. How are these kind of discussions happening within the Pentagon, within the Defense Department? How are they thinking about these sorts of issues and people who may end up actually being displaced because of these technological advances?
I think there's a growing recognition, not that people will necessarily be displaced, but that it actually puts the focus on people. And the need to upskill and not just hire the folks that you need, but actually provide the training and initiatives and education to the workforce that we have. And it's really part of a conversation that is much bigger than AI, but really looking at the fact that software is driving so much capability within the defense and the intelligence community. As you know, we used to have hardware, and hardware was the thing, but now we have hardware can be relatively standard, and now I can upgrade my capability with software updates. But the workforce itself is still very much grounded in this hardware-centric mindset. And so part of it is just how do we get the language and that foundation of software as a capability, so that then we can start asking ourselves, in addition to, how do I do that dull, dirty, and dangerous work with AI so that I'm not putting a human out there? But also, how can I do new things with AI? One example for the intelligence community, if my task is to find weak signals through global noise, can I use artificial intelligence to find me patterns that I didn't know I cared about, to find those second and third order patterns that may allow me to do a targeted assessment or a more specific assessment? Just that kind of pattern finding, how can I do new things with new capability? But it gets back to the point of, if AI isn't the solution, that's fine. But I do need to have a workforce and that federal workforce has that basic foundational language of software. And right now, that's kind of where the focus is on, is how do we get that level of discussion and conversation.
And Alana, I know that PwC, you were saying, was doing a lot in this area.
Huge effort within PwC right now to digitally upskill the entire workforce globally. It's a huge organization that I'm part of. Within the US, at least over the past few years, we've launched various initiatives internally to expose our anybody from all lines of service, from our auditors to our tax professionals to machine learning to data visualization to other types of software to robotics, like robotic process automation. And I believe it was 2 weeks back, our global chairman launched a $3 billion initiative globally to help our staff upskill. Now, this is not just to get more out of people or make our teams more efficient. It's recognizing the fact that on audits, our staff work incredibly long hours, and they don't necessarily need to do that if they can automate some of those tasks. So how can we make their lives easier? And that frees them up to think about, Lindsay, to your point, more creative ways that they could improve their daily lives as tax professionals or auditors or data scientists. And that's really, we expect that to continue the innovation across our very, very old, very, very large company.
Sure. And Swapna, is there any kind of specific thing that either RBC is doing or ways that you think we should be thinking about creating an ecosystem whereby we are setting up people for success in the long term, especially given the trajectory and the real pace of technological change, which is not slowing down, it's only getting faster. How and what should we be kind of helping our workers and our employees and the next generation get out in front of?
Yeah, so when we design these solutions and when we want to digitally transform these real world processes, right now we are actively trying to involve the very workforce whose work we are trying to sort of displace. So for example, if we develop a robo-advisor, or some other kind of solution, we want to involve the people who are doing that job right now in order for them to be able to give us the feedback in how this product or solution should be developed. And in a way, and they are very excited about it because in a way, it helps them to, it helps to educate, they can educate themselves on what we are trying to do, what we are trying to do digitally, what technologies are we trying to use in order to produce a seamless customer experience. So they get involved, they get educated. And obviously, as a company and a lot of other banks as well, we have initiatives where we upscale our employees and we provide training courses and workshops on agile methodologies or AI training or automated solutions training, etc. So we have those training programs, but at the same time, I think if we can involve the very people whose job we are trying to process or upscale, displace, basically, I think it would provide them a way to educate themselves as well in terms of what is happening in the company.
Right. I know we're running a little bit low on time, so just I guess 2 more questions, unless another one comes in. If there's one thing that you'd like the audience to take away from the discussion today, whether it's about bias or fairness or the ethics or the trust or the future or the regulatory, aspect, what is the one thing that you would like this audience to come away with?
So I know we didn't really touch on the topic of bias or fairness within machine learning, but I do think that it's all of our responsibility to think about how we want our systems to operate and what fairness actually means to us. More importantly, how we would want to measure that so that we can keep ourselves accountable across our systems that we're developing, and using that as a checkpoint, some type of a measure for ourselves in order to evaluate whether or not systems should even be built in the first place. If there are other technologies available that should be used in place of artificial intelligence, just keeping in mind some of the sensitive minority groups or other types of populations that we might be imposing unfair decision-making against. How do we protect ourselves against that?
Right. From my perspective, we as organizations, as companies, as these corporate entities, should be accountable for, we should feel responsible, and we should be responsible for, and we should take the ownership of the impact of AI or impact of using these new technologies, because customers, clients, citizens are getting aware of what companies are doing or how AI is affecting them. They are getting aware right now, but they don't know the full implications of it. So I would say, from my perspective, organizations need to be they need to take accountability, they need to take ownership, and also educate our customers, educate clients, educate citizens on what does it mean to use AI, and what does it mean to use your data, and what are we giving, what value are we providing you in return, and what are we taking from you as well. So I think education would be something at the top of my mind when I talk about AI.
I'm trying to keep 2 but brief. So firstly, the consideration of who is training the AI, really basic, and is this a balanced team across every different component that could cause bias, full stop. And secondly, as an entrepreneur, you have to be very optimistic all the time. I'm also dyslexic, which means I have to be optimistic a lot, because otherwise it can get quite intense at times. And on that point, I truly believe that the right people working with AI, the jobs are not so displaced, but instead their jobs are enabled by AI. So if we kind of consider AI becomes the bottom layer to make the boring things done, passed out, and actually use it as a way of building out people's confidence so that they can then start kind of leading the AI and driving it and enabling it to be that more intelligent. So viewing it with less fear but more excitement and an opportunity.
Great.
I mean, I think for any organization, either from the federal space or from the private space, a lot of this are questions of change management, of enabling small teams to try out new solutions, to fail fast and fail early, and that also requires alignment and support from leadership. So a lot of examples when we see organizations fail at this type of digital modernization or bringing in artificial intelligence is when we have that misalignment from the leadership support and the folks on the ground. And a lot of times this will challenge bureaucratic structures, processes, and authorities. But I think it really requires organizations to think about what does the future of work look like? Where are we deriving value? And so leaders enabling small teams.
Great. And I guess just to piggyback on that for a moment, a lot of what you just all said has to do with education. Educating your customers, educating the company, educating the wider populace about what you're doing and not doing. Who is going to be doing all of this educating? I mean, is there an ecosystem that is out there that is equipped to do this, or is there actually that where where there's a big gap that we actually need to work on filling?
I think there are so many resources out there for all of us to learn more about these technologies at different levels of depth, from a technical standpoint, even just from a strategic or even a business lens. There are open source courses that are offered on almost every platform: Coursera, Udacity, Stanford edX. I would highly recommend, to the extent that you want to learn more about some of those technologies, you seek out those pieces of information. And then think tanks, organizations tend to try and publish thought leadership in this space. So it's on all of us, I think, to seek out some of these educational opportunities and also provide them for the people that work with us.
Yeah.
Seconded. I mean, it sounds like the barriers to entry have never been lower. And she mentioned all of these wonderful education resources that I think absolutely should be taken advantage of.
Right. Well, and I guess we actually have a little bit more time than anticipated. So, another one of those questions that's kind of a big overarching question is, what are some of the trends that you're seeing that you're most excited about? I mean, I know there's so much going on in the space, but is there something that you've come across recently where you think, hot dang, that's a really fascinating thing?
I would say just the ethical, and I know maybe it's a overused word, but ethical use of AI and ethical use of data. I think that is the biggest trend I'm seeing in the market right now. And it started with a lot of events and scandals that happened over the last few years, and the whole emergence of GDPR regulation in Europe, and I'm sure North America will have something of its own in the near future. But that is the biggest trend I'm seeing in the market, not in terms of a product or a service, but how can we ethically make use of AI and provide these solutions to our clients, protect their privacy. How can we make explainable AI? How can we provide good explanations on the things, on the recommendations that we are putting forward to our clients and customers? That would be the trend.
Yeah. I echo the ethical angle. I would also add that one of the most important factors that's come out of the emphasis and the ethics of artificial intelligence is that the community itself is becoming much more multidisciplinary, which I think will really benefit it going forward. Originally, back 50 odd years ago when the term emerged, this was very much a multidisciplinary effort. Over the last few years, I think it's really focused in on the data science or the computer science angle, but making more people across the academic community or across our businesses involved in artificial intelligence as it's being developed by businesses, by academic institutions, thought leadership groups, will really only benefit us going forward.
Great. And 30
Yeah.
seconds, because I know that I've now made us go over. So yeah, please.
I really, we've just been given a new brief that I can't too much, but it's basically helping alert to fake social media accounts, mimicking individuals, because of course that's causing a huge amount of problems. And when you see the power that AI has to identify these accounts and alert and depict voice and sound and background noise and components in the accounts, that as a human you go, that's giving me a headache. It becomes really cool. I mean, truly, you kind of sit back in your chair and you go, this is very exciting. And we have so much ahead of us, I really believe, with the opportunities we're looking at this technology and moving forwards with it.
Great. Lindsay, anything else?
Final word. I think the multidisciplinary aspect is very cool. One trend that we've seen, the sword cuts both ways. One is if software's driving capability, things are moving really fast, and the defense acquisition and federal procurement system is struggling to keep up. But the flip side of that is that now the space is open to an entirely new range of suppliers and technology innovators that are getting to contribute to federal initiatives and to federal programs and to defense initiatives in ways that they hadn't been able to before. And in many ways, the technology is now able to keep up with the pace at which the requirements and the needs are changing on the field. And so that's a very cool kind of like cycle that we're seeing is, can I take elite men and women that are deploying out into zones, and can I send a couple data scientists with them that can now help them do their job better? And so it's a really interesting, this entirely new capability is available, and it's available from, I think all of us here at the stage are not the folks that you would have seen 30 years ago at a technology talk.
Right. Well, thank you so much, and I'm amazed what we got through in 45 minutes. So please help me thank our panel, and appreciate everybody staying here. I know this was the last panel before lunch, so greatly appreciate it.